2017 regular meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome all of our wonderful guests. We ask that you please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bolton? Mrs. Hoffman? Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Manera? Mr. Timmons?
Here.
Dansby?
Here. I need a motion to approve the following minutes. Special meeting, October 23rd, 2017. Regular board meeting, October 23rd, 2017.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved as presented. Ms. Bates, as chair of the Finance Committee, please present the October 17th, 2017 committee meeting report.
Yes. I present the report as printed. We had, just for comments, we had quite an extensive discussion with our governmental relations associates, and that the synopsis of that is included in your minutes, in addition to all of the bills that are currently before the legislature for the board to review. Cincinnati Preschool Promise had a written report, and we had comments by Pastor Tate, and this was the five-year forecast meeting, and that is included in the minutes as well, and we subsequently voted on that at our next meeting. CRA reports and Audit Committee Charter Revision update. We will be bringing that, as Ms. Jones will report soon, to back to the Finance Committee and then back to the board for adoption. So I submit this report as printed for acceptance.
Do board members have any questions or comments? Ms. Jones.
Yes, I just wanted to, in the item regarding the discussion on preschool promise, there is a correction to be made in the action item, the first action item, and that revision is in the last sentence about Minera being on the WDC, and that's not accurate. It is Daniel Hoying. And Daniel informed us at the policy committee, at a previous policy committee, that he was going to be a member of the Workforce Development Committee, and that was in response to the assignment relating to the potential policy on living wage. So I wanted to make that correction first. Secondly, I think there is some clarification needed in the second item. I'm not quite sure if I'm wanting to revise that at this point, but I know we have an agenda item to update on Cincinnati Preschool Promise, so I'll reserve any further discussion about that for that particular item when it comes up.
So to be clear, did we get the correction, Ms. Davis? Okay, thank you. Ms. Bolton.
If we want to delay the clarification to the update, we can. I need some clarification on the issue of the policy committee's role versus the finance committee's role versus making sure that the Cincinnati Preschool Promise folks are aware of the relevant policies. So if we can accept the minutes as is, because I don't think it says one thing or the other in the minutes, then we can have that discussion later if it pleases.
I deferring any decision around that, I'm okay with that, but I do think in the update around Cincinnati Preschool Promise, my desire is to have more of a broad scope conversation about roles and communication. So we may, use that as an example, but yeah, I agree that we don't have to have an action item on that or not change that particular action item at this time.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I had one other, thank you for that clarification. That was one of my questions. And then the other one was on page 2. On one of the actions, the Finance Committee will discuss engagement on the issue at the November 21st meeting. Is that the issue referring back to the concealed carry issue? Because if so, that doesn't seem like a finance issue.
Where are you?
On page 2, the first action item that came underneath the governmental relations update, the Finance Committee will discuss engagement on the issue. I think the issue is referring to what was right before it about concealed carry. And if that's the case, that should be a full board discussion, since that's not a Finance Committee issue.
On that, Chair Bates?
I don't recall that we referred concealed carry for further discussion in finance. Do you, fellow committee members? I believe that that's referring more to ECOT, to my recall.
I have some
Ms. Bolton.
recollection of it, because I think I raised it as an issue, because our Public Affairs Director, Strategic Plan, I had to get the whole title right eventually. At any rate, I think she had done something really valuable to us, because there were some press inquiries about some legislative actions that were being taken. And indeed, one of them was about concealed carry in and around schools.
Right.
And she was able to tell us that we didn't necessarily have a district response, because we may not have had a district policy in place or some sort of answer to that. So I think that's how it came up. Remember that? And that's why it was with the legislative, and then it kind of went, I think, whether it was a whole board discussion or whether it was going back to policy, I'm not sure. But that's how it got raised, was that she was right to look for what could be the official response and couldn't necessarily find one.
So it seems like that should be a full board discussion, though.
I agree.
Cool.
Yes.
And I think that, this again is another example of some of what I think we should talk about as full board, and I was going to address that in the preschool promise update, but this is another example about role clarity and communication, so.
Then too, Phyllis, if we could, that conversation around concealed carry, the new legislation, I mean, I think in terms of policy, our policy is aligned with what the current legislation says, so, but if we want to have some sort of say as a district about the proposed new legislation, then we need to come together as a board and talk about it, so that action will go to the full board, not the committee.
Did you get that, Ms. Davis? Okay. Ms. Jones, you're good. Ms.
Yeah, and just for clarity, and I know that policy, we do need a talk about role clarification, but the reason we have these discussions in policy and in finance is so some committee has their focus on these issues. And then, as we read the minutes and as we discuss with one another the issues, we can decide that, indeed this is worthy of full board, but without, at first, CPP and legislative issues, particularly with regard to finance, coming before the Finance Committee, and some of the policy issues such as the living wage coming under policy, all of those warrant full board discussion, but we do need to keep a focus on it, and I think it's a good thing that the committees are doing it. What we need to do is decide as a board what goes to the full board.
Once again, not wanting to continue to repeat myself, but I do think there has to be a full discussion around clarifying the roles. And I think what I find, especially in these minutes and some of the action items or, that came out, whether we, want them there or not, is that what tends to happen is most of the time, robust conversations that happen in finance get so overly sort of engaged in things that, in my opinion, should be going somewhere else. And us trying to figure out, whether or not it's a finance committee subject matter or should it be referred somewhere else, and what is the process, how do we communicate around that is crucial. So again, maybe if we could just wait until, and I'm using the preschool promise because there's a broader update around that. So I appreciate the comment, but I think there is a bigger discussion to be had. So.
Okay, so we'll put that up for discussion here towards the end of the
So
agenda.
just one
Yes.
comment to that.
At the,
Especially if we're going to talk about it later in the meeting, too. I do think that there is some guidance as to what's in what committee
There
based
is.
upon our bylaws.
There is.
And our bylaws are pretty specific about what's the jurisdiction of each committee. Frankly, almost anything can end up being in student achievement, almost anything can end up certainly in policy, and everything costs something. So I think we have to first look at our bylaws as the listing as to who's doing what, but the crucial thing is getting it out of committee and to the larger group, if indeed it needs full board discussion. And we need to figure out ways to have more time to actually discuss among all of us.
All clear? Thank you. Ms. Jones, as a member of the Finance Committee, please present the October 23rd, 2017 Audit Committee report.
All right, so that was a really good meeting, and what we talked about, Lauren did a great job in presenting information about, Lauren and our treasurer presented information on the annual audit overview and the 5-year forecast and the internal audit plan, which is Lauren's area of responsibility. There was also an OpenGov presentation. As you know, that presentation came to us at the last board meeting, and Brittany Marks presented that, and the audit committee was thrilled and asked very good questions about that. We spent a lot of time at that meeting talking about the audit committee charter revision. And there were some suggestions made about the process for reviewing and appointing new members. And Lauren is going to present to us sort of her recommendations based on this conversations. But there were sort of two arms to that discussion. One is what happens with the 4 folks who were nominated already, and there was a decision made that those 4 would be appointed as of effective January. They would actually, if need be, come back to do a special vote or whatever they needed to do in December to get that formalized. The second arm to this process was really creating and incorporating some changes in the charter document that would allow for a more formal process. And it is outlined in here, if you've had a chance to read that. And basically, it would allow enough time, probably 90 days prior to October, somewhere in that time frame, where if nominations came up and nominations are broadly accepted, there will be a process that if community wanted to nominate people, they could do that. And the committee would work through a process of interviewing by standard questions and have a rubric for that, and then make decisions based on where there's the need. So there wasn't any final determination about a set number of people to be on the committee. It was more of if we feel like we need it at that particular time or somebody resigns, what that process would look like. So that's where we are now, and I think what we need to do is, if there's any questions or anything, or people have comments about that, that's fine, but we will need to, probably in the next Finance Committee, write the policy again or revise the policy again.
The policy specifically?
The
for
charter, sorry.
Excellent. Do board members have any questions or comments? Well, I appreciate the work that you've moved forward, Finance Committee, related to that charter. As we know, we had some concerns about how we equitably and in full transparency appoint people to the committee. So I really appreciate the work that you've done there. I think I need a voice vote or a motion to approve the committee meeting reports.
So move.
Is there a second?
second.
Any opposed? The committee meeting reports are adopted. I'm sorry? All in favor? Aye. 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 Thank you. The committee reports are approved as presented. Ms. Bates, please present the retirements.
Yes, we have several civil service personnel who have applied for retirement, and I would like to recognize them for their service. We have Judith Bacon, Marcia Clark, Angela Morel Axel, Lionel Roberts, Gwendolyn Spikes, Jennifer Sprengard, Elaine Struve, and Anthony Toll. We thank you for your service to our children and wish you well in your future.
Congratulations. Okay, new business. We have several presentations today, and I'm actually going to turn over to our superintendent, Laura Mitchell, to give introductions.
All right, thank you. So about this time every year, the administration provides a presentation that outlines the enrollment, the current enrollment, and then projections for next year. We use that information to inform our strategic planning as well as our budgets. And so we'll be in the budget season very soon, right after the new year begins. And so Sarah Trimble Oliver is going to present the first presentation on enrollment and projections. And then about this time, we also have a presentation on magnet enrollment, that process, and so Pat Nomiller will do that. And then the board asked for an update and a presentation on CPS.
Good morning. So I actually do have a short presentation. As Laura said, we do a district enrollment analysis about this time every year. October 15th is our snapshot day. So I have some good news to share with you guys this morning. So for the 6th straight year, we do have increased enrollment across the district. We're up to 35,355. So that includes a preschool increase of 174 new preschool students over last year. Drilling down a little bit further, we see, so overall district-wide, the increase was of 196. And if you look at charter schools and non-public, they are both have decreased this year. Within the non-public, however, the Ed Choice Voucher, Peterson, and Autism Scholarship counts have gone up, which does impact the budgeting. So because charter and non-public have gone down and our enrollment has gone up, we have increased our market share for Cincinnati school-age children to 68.2%. So just a quick look at our demographic subgroups as recognized by ODE. We have small changes in our subgroups, with our Hispanic subgroup being our highest increase to 5.3%. We also have started doing some geographic analysis. So of all of the students who were new to our district from this time last year, pre-K through 12, the top 3 zip codes of where they're coming from are all on the west side. So the top one was the Cheviot Westwood area. The second one was the Western Hills area, and the third one was the Price Hill area. Again, we've been experimenting with new types of analysis that we have capabilities now, leveraging the Google Maps API. So these are all of our new preschool students. So we're experimenting with new ways to analyze that, seeing, you can see there's a cluster, large cluster, kind of in the downtown area with the Rising Stars Vine, a cluster in the Winton Hills Spring Grove Village area, and a cluster in the Millvale area. Mm-hmm. So that is where we are right now. We do take those enrollment numbers and plug them into our projections model so that we can project what our enrollment will be next year. That will drive the budgeting and the staffing process coming in the next few months. So we actually have 3 models of projections, mathematical algorithms that we plug these numbers into. The first model is the most detailed model, and that is projecting us to be up another 189 students to 35,544. So that concludes the presentation on enrollment and projections.
Do board members have any questions or comments? Ms. Hoffman?
Yeah, I do have a question. It's more of a long-term question, though. So if this is not the right time for it, let me know. But we know that our elementary schools many of them are busting at the seams. We're starting a lot of new elementary schools, a whole lot of new preschools around the city. And so we would assume then that means those kids are going to move on to high school at some point. And so I'm wondering, does that actually mean that our high schools are going to be busting at the seams? Or do we end up losing kids at the high school level historically? And just wondering what the plan is there, because we know most of our high schools are almost completely filled at this point too.
Sure. So we are able to do an analysis of kind of feeder schools. Even though all of our high schools are high schools of choice and anyone can choose any high school, there are still patterns where we can identify, certain students who attend these elementary schools tend to go toward these high schools. So we can do that kind of analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to make sure we're prepared, since we are opening so many new elementary schools, that those kids are going to stay with us through high school, and we have a plan for that.
That's a very good point. Ms. Bolter?
Yes, first of all, if I could have that report in hard copy, it would
Yes,
help me. Just
sure.
That'd be great.
And we'll do that in the Friday packets.
Ask you for a couple things at the end.
Also, if you could put the preschool piece back up, the dots, and see if there's any way that we have the knowledge or expertise geographically and numerically to see how any of that addresses what we heard from both the RAND report and also from the preschool campaign as it pertains to deserts, if you will. I think it would be important to see if we are, and I think we are, and I know other private providers are too, are addressing it, but it would be good for us to be able to make sure that we are addressing that problem, at least geographically if possible.
Yeah, I think that would be possible. Like I said, we are just learning how to leverage these new mapping capabilities, so that'd be a great analysis.
And on the west side too, I think that again is another reason and justification, as much of the dialogue is happening in the public about whether or not we plan or we didn't plan or whatever. It wouldn't be bad to also always remind people what the UC projections and what the state projections were every single time we report our own numbers. Largely, that would give more people more context to know that the state thought we'd have 28,000.
Right.
And we've been working hard to do a number of things. The final thing on the high school, I appreciate Member Hoffman mentioning that. I know we talked about that a couple of years ago, especially as it pertained to Montessori. And very frankly, a number of our high schools are busting at the seams already, a few of them at any rate. And so it is important to kind of plan, and obviously that would be a further justification to make sure that all the high schools that have space are allowed to use their space.
Ms. Bates?
Yeah, I have a question about the preschool. The density in the downtown area, is that because the children are attending the Rising Stars, or because they live in that area?
That is where they live.
Okay, so do we have places for them to go to after they leave Rising Stars?
Like, are there enough seats, like you're saying, at Rothenberg and
Or wherever?
What do you mean places to go to? Like
kindergarten seats?
Kindergarten.
Oh, okay. If they live in the community, do they have places to go? Is that what you're asking? I'm trying to understand.
Right. Right, or do we have to look at changing boundaries to make sure that there's a path so we don't have our children educated at preschool and then leaving for charters and parochial schools because there aren't choices for them?
Yeah, what I'm thinking is we can do a similar analysis to the question of elementary schools feeding into high schools. We can do analysis of the preschools feeding into kindergartens, make sure there's enough space in those neighborhood schools.
Mm-hmm. And my other question, because we're seeing children coming in as new district students on the west side, are they new residents or are they coming from charters and parochials?
Yes, all of that. There's
So-
actually thousands of students, even though we only net an increase of 196, there's actually thousands of students that we get from charters and get new from the district, and that leave us and go to charters and that move out of district, thousands.
So is there an influx of affordable housing on the west side that is, attracting people, or what's going on? And are we being apprised of the changes in the neighborhood so that we can prepare
It's a great question.
for ACEs, perhaps?
So we can get the breakdown of how many have left for another school, or how many have left the district, moved out of the district.
Ms. Bolton?
We had another good report from the Community Learning Center Institute, people that have been tracking the mobility rate in their 6 schools, 4 of which I think are particularly pertinent. And indeed, I think at that, if I'm correct, I look over my members, we did want to, again, put housing on the agenda because there were some really interesting strategies to deal with it, even something as simple as the housing opportunities made equal, being apprised if there's somebody has to move, can we keep them within the attendance boundaries when they're finding another home? So there's lots of stuff. So I think that's going to be coming from the student achievement once again as a good topic for us and to talk with the city.
Ms. Manera?
Yeah, I want to tie something that I heard on Monday at our Student Achievement Committee meeting, and that is that when we were talking about graduation, I heard the administration say many times urgency, and I really appreciate that. The urgency to prepare for these graduation changes, and that, administration is getting ready to be 1 foot ahead, or maybe 2 or 3, which I really appreciated that. So I'm trying to bring that to context to what we're seeing today is I think we're not communicating the urgency that we can see with these trends of population in our schools and in our district. I think as you prepare strategically to kind of tackle this, that we're communicating that. And I don't know what that entails as far as just preparing our websites and filling it with this information, but also visiting our councils, especially on the west side, because I think these are the type of things that cause a hiccup later on when we try to make decisions about opening schools or expanding. And so I think these tidbits of information, if there would be a way to channel these to the councils, if anything, so we can say neighborhoods are informed. We don't have any major details, but at least this information helps people understand we're doing everything we can that as the story's being created in this district, there's opportunity to be part of it in whatever capacity, or at least to be informed. So I would just encourage us to look in that direction as we proceed, because I don't know how many people are watching it. Thank God that we are streaming this now, but I don't know how many people have access to, you said I have a very small presentation, but this small presentation has a huge impact. So thank you so much for providing that, and I would just encourage us to think about communication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to ask for all board members to get a copy of this electronically.
Yes.
And I heard Ms. Bolton ask for a hard copy.
No problem.
Can I add just
Thank
one
you.
other quick thing? I'm sorry.
Sarah, if I can get that electronically today, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, so I mean, I think I just was listening to what Board Member Manera was saying, and I think part of this urgency too is communicating to community councils, but also to our wider public, right? I think, especially as we're all now talking about Renew 24 and all that, the majority of the people I talk with don't know the story of CPS is that we are growing, and that here it is, we're growing again this year. I don't know if the folks from the Enquirer or the Herald or City Beat or anyone are watching this live stream, but they're not here to hear this, right? And so I think we have to figure out how do we get that message out that we're growing, but not just where we're growing. I mean, the story that you just told that we're growing on the west side, the 3 zip codes with the highest growth were all on the west side. What is that story? Why is that, to Board Member Bates's point, why is that the big growth point? I mean, I think that's all super important for us to get out from just this room to the wider audience. So if we're not going to be able to kind of, if the papers don't really want to pick this kind of story up, I think our new chief strategist marketing, we all have to figure out what her title is. Our person in charge of being the voice of the district.
That's Lauren.
Yes, it is no small task to do, but I do think it is on us to say this is an important story for our city to know, and that it's not just this is why the levy is important, but this is why this district is so critical to the success of our city. So just want to make sure I emphasize
Well,
that
yeah,
point.
not to belabor that same issue, but my next logical question is, how are we going to tell this story? And how do we engage the public so they can be a part of the story? The comment related to do the people have some place to go downtown? I'm sure if they live in the community, Rothenberg's an excellent choice, as is Hayes Porter, if we're still calling it that, as is Taft Elementary. So those are excellent choices for families that live close there. But this is huge, and I'm sitting here really just trying to contain myself because this is such awesome information, and we have to figure out how we disseminate it to the public, and better yet, how we bring the public in to help make the decisions moving forward. That's going to turn into an assignment. Thank you. Our next presentation deals with magnet enrollment. Is that right? Ms. Pat Neal Miller, welcome. Some heavy topics today.
Good morning, distinguished board, Superintendent Mitchell, and guest.
Thank you.
I'm pleased today to talk about the magnet enrollment, but I have pulled the wrong one up. I cannot see it.
No.
Oh, thank you, thank you. All right, today I'm going to outline the magnet process. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the timeline and also our family engagement that we've been working on today. So amid increased safety concerns and the board's desire to really provide an equitable and accessible process for all of their families, they discontinued the first come, first served process and instituted the lottery system. This is now its third year. Now, early and clear communication to our families was very important for us, and so we proceeded to start having magnet information sessions with our parents early on in October, and as you can see by the dates that we have completed quite a few of them, and we have a few more to go. In these different sessions and during these parent information sessions, we made sure that all of the parents received their magnet guide. We also created a one-pager with all of the information on the timelines and the necessary information that they would need, and also, more importantly, our contact information so that they could reach us. We made sure that with the cooperation of our ELL department that all of them were translated in all the languages, so no matter where our families were in whatever location that they attended, that they would be able to be accommodated. Also, too, the Strategic Communication and Engagement Office has posted the brochure on the CPS website, and we are going to make sure that before the process gets too far in, that it will also be translated in all the other languages as well. And one other thing that we're going to be doing on November 9th, our Assistant Superintendent Bill Miles and Customer Help Center Manager Leslie Bryant are going to be on a talk radio show, which is at Xavier, to discuss the lottery process. So we're trying to cover all of our venues this year. All right, so getting right into this, this year we are going to have 3 rounds again. The first round starting November 1st. And we are strongly encouraging all of our parents this year to please participate in that first round to enable them to have the best possible outcome. We will have additional rounds, of course, to allow for both existing and for new families to our district to participate later in the year. Now, the application timeline for round 1, which is really we deem to be the most important, is going to start November 13th. That round will run until the December 1st timeframe. Now, parents can apply at any time during that period, so they can apply on the first day, they can apply on the last day. They will all have an equal chance in the lottery process. Now, in late December, early January, we'll be sending status letters out to the parents to their homes with detailed information on the school selection and the instructions on how to register and also to submit their documentation. One of the great features about this is that parents have the ability to apply using any type of electronic device 24/7, 24 hours a day during this application period. Each child will have their own application and lottery number. If there are multiple birth children and the parents wish to have them together, then as long as they do it in ranking order and as long as they do it in the same round, we will assign them one number. And this number will be in an effort to keep the children together. Also, too, this year, they will still have the ability to rank up to 5 choices and ranking order, and their selections just need to be done within that round. They are also able to make edits to it as long as they're doing it in that period. And we have also heard from our parents, too, that they wanted some type of guarantee that the application did process correctly, and so with the help of ITM, we have done an enhanced confirmation number for them. This is a screenshot of the actual application. Each application, if you notice here, is assigned a magnet lottery number. And then also, the parents, if they wish to make any additions, they can create their own password, and if for whatever reason that password, they forget it or whatever, we can certainly reset it in the Customer Help Center. Also, too, they are able to now have a print function, so they can print it off, or more likely, our parents now today are just taking a quick screenshot with their phone so that they have that information and can keep it. Now, as discussed previously, parents will receive a status letter in their preferred language with the next step instructions. Parents that do not receive their top selection will automatically be placed on a wait list for their top choice. If they select, say, their second or their third choice, it does not keep them from still remaining on that wait list for their higher choices. And that wait list stays until the first of the school year. And during that period, though, we are asking parents to please make sure that all of their contact information is correct. It's very crucial during this period as we're trying to contact them, reach them by either phone, email, or by mail, that we're able to reach them if their status should happen to change. And then in an effort also to enhance the parent experience, this year we are creating a online video, and this video will review all of the information. So just in case they are not able to attend one of our magnet sessions, or if they just want a refresher, they will be able to see this video, and our own Leslie Bryant is doing the voiceover for it, and so we're very excited about that process. And again, this is just simply another effort and way to keep our parents connected and informed throughout this entire magnet lottery. And as always, if any questions occur, we are always welcome and open and available for parents to come in. We can walk them through the process. They can contact us over the phone or email us. We were always there to be there for assistance. All right, this concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions for me?
Do board members have any comments or questions? Ms. Hoffman?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is around access. So we are all online now.
That's correct.
If families don't have access to the internet themselves, can you do this on your phone, since a lot of our families do
Yes.
have phones? Are we opening up our schools, our libraries? Like, who
Absolutely.
are we
Every school has a designated computer, and also the Customer Service Center has 3 kiosk systems now, so we've increased the amount of accessibility for them if they come here, but they can go to a library, they can go to any place that has the electronic devices, and certainly can do the application period. So we wanted to make sure that parents had no barriers to actually applying.
Okay, so that, I'm wondering how we're getting that message. So I, as a CPS parent, I appreciate all of the phone calls, texts, emails I've been getting that these sessions are happening. I cannot miss that these sessions are happening.
Okay.
But I am also wondering if there is a way to say somehow in those that if you don't have access to the internet, there's a computer at every neighborhood school or something, so that for those families who can't come to an event or something,
Exactly.
they know.
We are advising them during our sessions. That information is also on our one-pager, and then we are also going to have it in our video.
Okay.
Yes.
And so a follow-up question to that too, about making sure that the full diversity of our families have this information. are we doing, so all of these sessions, it seems like a really kind of geographically diverse
Yes.
location, so that's fantastic. But I think we're also asking parents to come to us again at all of these, and I'm wondering if there's any, if y'all are doing any times where we're going to families. So where we know families already are, whether it's at our preschools, whether it's at, you know, churches, wherever it might be that we know our families and kids are, if we're also going to them.
We certainly can make arrangements to do that. I know that Rising Stars has reached out to us, and we are going to be doing a presentation at Rising Stars, so another informal opportunity for us to be able to do it. And certainly, if there is any additional communities that wanted us to come out, we can certainly do that throughout this process. We're just simply trying to make sure that parents really understand the process this year, are clear about it, and have every opportunity.
Right, and I think that I think will be one of the keys, though, is that if we want a more diverse set of families at our schools, then we have to be going to a more diverse set of families and telling them that we want them there, and letting them know what the opportunities are, instead of just inviting them to come to a session, that we're going to them. So I think I would just encourage you all to think about where those places are that we could round this out.
I agree. Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
Yes, I thank you for the information, and I've been on the website and can see where there's all kind of information about the lottery and be prepared and offering all the opportunities. And also that we are progressing toward improving, which is, to me, is really part of our whole equity process. I would encourage us, though, to also look at informal venues. You know, going to the schools and the families coming to the schools. I mean, that's nice, and I want families to do that. But sometimes there are families that see it in Kroger's or, you know, hanging up on the billboards and things like that, and they notice it, and that might be a different way of getting people in, you know. So as many innovative ways that we can think about to get the word out, I'd like us to consider that. So thanks for the work, and I really believe, I mean, for this year, for me, looking at it, I can see the hard work that has gone into improving our process, so.
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without the cooperation of all of our departments, ITM, ELL, and of course, our strategic communications department.
Ms. Bates?
Yes, and this is primarily for the board, and we've discussed this in committee before, but another agenda item for our ACES committee has to be free internet access for city residents. I know that former Mayor Mallory brought this up and it was shot down, and, you know, recently, or within recent history, PG Sittenfeld did just so, and that was shot down, but at that time, they didn't have the support of the school board and the reasons why we believe this is so important. It's important for this situation for our magnet school sign up, but also for access to Power School, to Schoology, to you know, assignments, all of that for families. So I would ask that we add that to the ACES agenda, and with some urgency, because that truly will help bring about equity. And the other question, we have a provision for multiple birth children, but I recently talked to somebody who moved into the city, and they were really trying to plan to live in Cincinnati Public, and they had they had 2 or 3 kids, but they weren't multiple births. And they were told that to get into a magnet school, they could apply, and if one got in, the other child had to go to a neighborhood school for a year and then reapply the next year, and they just said, there's no way. So that's kind of a glitch that needs to be addressed as well. And I know sometimes it's addressed at the school level, depending on the openings, but I believe that we need to communicate this better to parents, to be more welcoming and not tell them that they have to, you know, have their children in several schools until they're reunited in several years. To me, that does not seem to be a good way to attract families to our district. So whether you do it procedurally and report back to the board, or you believe it's something that needs to be in policy, that's something that needs to be addressed, because as we see with the west side, if people are moving into the city, we can't give them the runaround and tell them, you know, that their children can't go to school together because of our procedures.
Okay.
Ms. Bolton?
This probably is just a sidebar to all of that, but, and it isn't specifically about Magnet, but it is about enrollment in our own language and what we do ourselves and our expectation. Even the use of the word sibling for priority. I know you open a whole panacea of all kinds of things, but an awful lot of our families, there are people living together who are not necessarily siblings. They might be, you know, 2 years apart and they're aunts and nieces. I mean, but they're going to a particular school. I just think the sibling thing reveals about us something. It's the easier way to do it, and maybe the simpler way to do it, or the more normal or more middle-class way of doing it. But I can think of several families where they're in the household, it is a household and it's a family and it's blood related, but the sibling thing doesn't work, and they may only be a few years apart from one another or whatever. So it's just something to think about, as our language should be maybe a little bit more reflective of our population.
Yeah. Ms. Manera?
Thank you, Pat, for all the work that you are doing on this. You know, I go back to our community learning center, just concept on, you know, we talked about our student achievement on how to make sure our community learning centers are healthy and that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And to Ms. Hoffman's point, the resource coordinator should be that contact in the community. This should not, you know, when I hear the great comments that she made about going out to the community, I can see how maybe it might seem like we're adding more, but really, if we are leveraging our community learning centers and we are asking our resource coordinators to do what part of their role is to do in the community, we should have those answers. Like, we should know exactly what churches, what nonprofits, what social agencies, what community businesses need to have this information. So this is, again, leveraging partnerships that we already have in this district. This is holding our partners accountable to what we need from them as well. So I'm not, you know, I feel like as board member, I need to be very open, and we all need to be very open about community learning centers are not just a perk, or they're not just an enhancement. They are the life of our schools outside of academics. So again, and I know I've challenged administration on this, as we continue to assess, as we continue to inventory our community learning centers and evaluate how healthy they are, this is vital for that resource coordinator to be engaged in the community so we can have that information and know where to go to our families.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you.
Guys, one more. Yeah, so one more question too is around one of our specific schools. So with Spencer School, I just have a question. So I know when the planning for that happened, when the school was opened, it was about equity and access, right? That we wanted more equity and access for kids of color and low-income children to our gifted programs. I think this, if we're talking about telling the story again, I think this is another case where around the country, right? We weren't the only ones with this problem, where there was this disproportionality in who is being called gifted and getting those services. And when was a question across the country people were trying to answer, and our administration just came up with a very creative way to make sure there would be more equity and access to that programming, right? So I think it was something like only about 25% of kids of color were being identified and getting access to that programming. And then we saw the initial numbers at Spencer, and about half of the kids at Spencer are kids of color. I mean, that is a remarkable story to tell, right? And that around the country, people should be learning from what our administration did here. But it was so purposeful. And so I think just in year 2 of Spencer, we need to make sure that the work that our administration is doing in terms of recruiting families to that school is as purposeful in year 2 as it was in year 1, because that didn't just happen. I know you all did. I mean, you looked at the data and disaggregated it and really were so purposeful in figuring out how do we make sure that these families know about this opportunity. We welcome them, we give them the information, we make sure that they're signing up for this school. So that is making sure our gifted testing is happening, and families are getting the results in time to consider this opportunity, and that you all have the time to go through those results and recruit those families, and all of that is happening. So just making sure that, I mean, the success we saw in Spencer this year is something that we're keeping on our radar to continue.
Yes.
Great, well, you've done some amazing work per the usual. My biggest concern is, again, going to the people. So if we want the people, we have to go to the people. And so how do we figure out how to get this information in the hands of people who absolutely, need it? To hear a story like what Ms. Bates told about one child goes someplace, we hear those things all the time.
Yes.
And again, the work is incredible, and this is a huge improvement in having moved things forward, but nobody really knows. So I'm challenged by challenging you to help figure out how we get the information better disseminated so that we can have our students and our families with the best information they can have. Because we want them with us. We just have to make it as easy, as possible. And then the opportunities for folks who don't have the internet and those are bigger problems that I think we are all committed to trying to help work through. But if I don't have the equipment that's necessary to even do a simple or simplified enrollment process, that's a bigger challenge. So I think collectively we have to figure some of these things out, but we're gonna charge you guys with how to figure out how to take it to the streets more, or however you say that, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Our final presentation will be I Am CPS.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to our board, Superintendent Mitchell,
Thank you.
Treasurer Wagner. Very glad to be here to provide an update on some, I have to say, some very awesome work that we have done as a team, as a community, as departments, as leadership team over the last 3 years. So I Am CPS is the data and the studies would indicate cultural development or change of culture typically takes 3 to 5 years with an organization. And currently right now, we're into year 3. Our first year was really a planning year. It was, what does this look like? What do we think this should look like? This first year, we actually brought in a consultant, outside consultant agency that helped work us through this process. And we spent a year-long process working with them, understanding what we wanted this culture to look like, what we wanted to represent as an employer, as an employees. Year 3, I'm sorry, that was year 1. Year 2, we identified for this to be successful, it can't be an outside agency that's leading this work. It needs to be us that leads this work. So we made a transition in year 2 where we took on that process as a leadership team. And the sessions that we had, that we planned, they were organized by the leadership team. They had different roles. And just to break down that process for you, those sessions were led by different members of the superintendent's leadership team. We brought together a core team that represented departments within this building and Iowa Street, because that's where we knew we wanted to start. That was identified early in the process. And then from that, we kind of learned and gained information. So, to take us back to where we started, we set the stage, we planned, we understood what we wanted things to look like. We gained the buy-in, and the buy-in transitioned. It started with an outside agency leading us through that process, but then us understanding for this to be successful, it needed to be us. It needed to be the employees leading this. And then right now, I believe we're at the stage of making significant progress. And ultimately, we want to move to ensuring success. That's where we would see that. So when we transitioned to owning this internally for the 16-17 school year, we took on several different activities, several different events throughout the year. First, we facilitated 4 IMCPS leadership sessions. That was folks from this building and from Iowa Street, where we brought them together, activities led by the leadership team, to really get back to what those what we meant when we said, I care, I continuously improve, I collaborate, and I commit to success. We then also developed tailored structures for individual departments. So if an individual department was stuck on an I care concept, we were able to tailor individual sessions for them that they could use within their department to instill that information within their department. We also developed sessions for our principals, bottom left-hand corner. We brought them together to share with them what we were doing. And quite frankly, because they are the owners of their own community throughout the city, they do this work better than we do many times. So it was actually an opportunity for us to learn from them, which was great. And then lastly, for those that were able to attend, and if you did attend our June event, we celebrated. And that's one thing that Laura, as superintendent, has really instilled in all of us. We work hard, we get results, but we need to celebrate those results. And that's what we did in June. We had a district-wide function here in the back parking lot. For those of you who missed it, you missed Laura dancing. We decided to raffle off Bill Miles' parking spot without him knowing. He was with his son. Sent him a message, let him know it was gone. Actually, one of the things, and it just really goes to show you how sometimes the simple things mean a lot. So as the day was going on, the event was going on, we were struggling, some folks were eating, getting their food, and then they were leaving. So we need to come up with something to make sure that people are staying so they see the whole message. It was also a tribute to Mary because it was her last session as well. And Laura did a phenomenal job with the presentation to Mary as our outgoing superintendent. But people were starting to leave. So very quickly, we put our minds together with our project team, and leadership team members gave up their parking spots to raffle off. And you would have thought we were raffling off gold.
No.
In fact, one individual contacted Dan Hoying the day of and asked Dan when he was going to move his car because she wanted to park there front. So it's those little things, though, that mean a lot. And that's one thing that we learned through this process. It was a little thing that meant a lot to our employees.
All right.
We also launched the IMCPS shout-out board. We crafted 3 additional IMCPS success stories, and we developed 5 videos. And I know some of those have been shared, but I wanted to share one now with you. And this is Becky Arlington, and Becky is a teacher at Mount Airy School. And this is just an example of the passion that we're looking for.
My mom did daycare when I was the kid who played school. You know, it's like, okay, I want to be the teacher. My name's Becky Arlington. I teach second grade math and science at Mount Airy School. I knew I was going to be in education, but I also knew I'd be urban education. I like the fast pace, so it's definitely my speed. It's who I am.
All right, I'm gonna try this again.
My mom did daycare when I was little. I was the kid who played school. You know, it's like, okay, everybody, I want to be the teacher. My name's Becky Arlington. I teach second grade math and science at Mount Airy School. I knew I was going to be in education, but I also knew I'd be in urban education. I like the fast pace, so this is definitely my speed. It's who I am. I am a teacher.
She not only works with the kids, but she helps staff as well. She's the team leader for second grade. She helps them not only gather the data, but they use the data to help improve instruction.
I'm constantly thinking about what's next. How did I do yesterday? What can I do better tomorrow?
Her students come first. She will go above and beyond each and every day to make sure that they are getting what they need.
I have the highest expectations for all of my kids, and I let them know that when they come in the door. I love these kids. These are my kids.
I'm Becky Arlington, and I am CPS.
We actually did a great activity with Becky. She was actually at our new teacher hire orientation this summer in August. And we showed the video and then actually had her there to do a small session with our new hire teachers. So it was very impactful for our new hire teachers to see not only the video, but then also meet that personality in person. So it was tremendous. So one of the things that was really important as we were going through this work is to identify where were we? What have we done? What progress have we made? And I'm very happy to share the progress that has been made. So if you look at the sample set from October of 2015 assessed, so this was 211 employees who were basically could fill out an evaluation related to their experience within CPS, their department. We found that some people looked at it differently. Some were speaking about CPS in general. Some were answering questions in light of their department affiliation. But in June of 17, you can see just during that period of time where we went. And it basically, this attributes to the work that the leadership team has done, the various departments, the support of the superintendent, and the work that we've done to achieve. So again, I just share with you our focus. This was the work that came out of the original planning meeting when it was just a planning stage. This is what we came up with as a group, a team at that time. It still lives, it still breathes, and you can see from the previous slide that reinforcing this work has made significant improvement. So now you talk about how does that look? And Superintendent Mitchell has shared with the board her vision of a matrix team. So really what this team has done, we spent this time talking about what it looks like, how we want it to look, how it should feel, how we should support our schools, but now we've implemented. And we're to a point now through this matrix model that we've come together as a team, as a central office team to assist our schools. And that's been a critical piece of this transformation. We're not talking about it any longer, we're showing the work. And those meetings occur every Tuesday. They're guided by Bill Miles, Tiani Amat, Susan Bunty, and Cheryl Brodnax. It brings together a representation from every department, and we're there to solve issues for our schools. So we've transitioned, we've gone from talking about it to actually exemplifying what that looks like. And just to break it down from a human resource perspective, this is what it looks like in our department. So for us to follow that, we've gone now from a matrix team down to how do you support that within a department, and this is how we support that work. So we've had to rethink in human resources how we're going to provide and support the matrix. So in closing, I wanted to share, as requested, an update regarding the wonderful work that's been done. And I have one final video. This was a video that we did this past summer. Some of you might have seen the display that we had. Having all kinds of technical difficulties, I apologize. So with that, I'd be glad to address any questions that you may have.
Do board members have any questions or comments?
Same broken record thing. Our poor Lauren is going to be like, I'm one person, I can't do every job. But this is, again, a remarkable story to tell. And even those videos, right? Like, I wanted to cry watching that teacher, and I want that teacher teaching my own kids in CPS. And I can't find that video anywhere on our website. Or even just the I care, I collaborate, what each of those things are that we value as a district. Right. I looked the other day when I saw that this was going to be on our agenda to try to make sure I knew what we were going to be talking about, and I couldn't find it easily. And this is such important work. We hear all the time from our community, the culture of CPS, and what are we doing to improve the culture of CPS? Yep. And we're doing so much to improve the culture of CPS, and so you don't have to answer it right now, but at some point, love to hear, how are we gonna get this important work you all are doing, those videos that are really what we're about, out broader to our community?
I agree. I feel really inspired, and I want other people to feel inspired too. Like right this moment, I'm so proud of the work, and we need to let our community know exactly what you guys are doing.
Agreed.
So, Mr. Manera.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love it. We sit at a little bit higher than most people when we get a chance to see a lot of this. And so unless you find it or dig for it, I don't know if our families are able to get it. But what I don't see, and I know is that it's not implied or anything, but I would like to challenge us to really work hard at bringing the highlights on. What about our clinical engineers? What about our, staff? I mean, I know teachers are in the forefront, but the culture is every single employee, right? Every single employee, and we need to also highlight, because they do some amazing work. The fact that our teachers are set up to succeed is because there is another set of employees that is doing amazing work, getting things ready overnight. And so I'm not saying that they don't exist. I just think that most of the time, and with the time that we have, we get to highlight, administration or teachers, but I would love to hear the other stories on what is actually happening. A lot of those employees have their kids in our schools. So hearing their perspective, celebrating their victories as they see themselves part of I Am CPS would be something that I would love to see more of too.
So the third video that we showed was a teacher. We also, one of our spotlights was LaKendale Heights, who is a supervisor in facilities, who's over cleaning, making sure our buildings are clean. He was a spotlight focus as well. We totally agree. Our first was actually a paraprofessional as well. So we were trying to spread across the employee complement, because I think we totally agree with what you're saying. It's not just this one group of people, it's the entire group of people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
My only report is just to reiterate how talented our staff truly is and to thank them for the work that they do every single day.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the revised recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman? Ms. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Manera? Aye. Mr. Timmons?
Aye.
President Copeland-Dansby?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Yes, I think it got number, let's see, page 3, I think, let's see, if the treasurer can explain for the public too, the student activity funds as it pertains to this airline tickets for, I think it's Clark, for their spring intercession, that, explain to the public that that's where that money comes from.
Sure. So in governmental accounting, we use separate funds to collect different sources of revenue to the district. The student activity fund is generated through parent payments and student collections, fundraisers, so that they can help fund their specific needs of the school. Clark Montessori happens to do their intercession trips, and so this represents the money they've collected to help fund that trip.
And I asked that specifically because later in the treasurer's report, maybe page 7, we have contributions on, I think it's G, where we had people contribute monies for our children to, I think, is that the one with uniforms, if I recall? It just, if people don't understand the coding,
Right.
they start to think that we're paying for airline tickets for Clark students, and we're out asking for contributions for our children's uniforms.
Sure.
So it's, if there's a way to better communicate this sort of thing in the report, because this is what is out there in the public.
Yep.
And they will not fully appreciate that. I mean, I don't want chapter and verse or whatever, but I just think that it does look a little strange to do that. And then I think, four, yeah, no, that's fine. Four was the STEM instructor, is that the STEM instructor for William Howard Taft School? It's a
Which page?
I'm sorry, page 4. I know they've been wanting a STEM, that's what that is. Thank you so much, all right. And then, has on page 5, letter B, gone through the district for approval curricularly. I know that's not a treasurer's question, I guess it's the superintendent, just because it could be
Yeah,
weird.
so I need to get additional information.
That'd be great. And then I think that takes care of me. Yes, thank you. Oh, nope. The last one, X on 8. Could someone explain that to us? It's the Academy of World Languages. I know there's a wellness center. What role are we playing in that effort? I know there's a tremendous number of contributions from the community and stakeholders. Is this district money?
I'm going to ask Mr. Moore to
Great,
answer those
thank you.
questions.
Our function is only as private clinicians. There's no funds, whatever, it's insurance, training our staff and our design.
Okay, so it's just this, the way it's described, it's just for that. It looks like we're purchasing something, but,
It's not, positive or fundraising.
So where, the question, it would help if you answered, where does the money come from? Where does that 1.5 million come from?
Money's coming from 3 different sources, the health department and the health alliance and 3 different sources that bank money.
Interact for Health.
and this is a story to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Incredibly, you know, to begin with. But again, the way it reads, it looks like, and the dispute that we've had from some folks, I know some of our folks that are out there on the levee trail and whatever, have heard different people talk about money are we allowed to spend on facilities like Clifton School versus such and such school. It just, again, a little bit more description would help make people understand a little bit better what's going on, and they'd have a clearer understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, great suggestions.
Thank you.
Anything else? On page number 6, then and now certificates. Can we talk about the transitions and nursing training program at Woodward High School? What is it?
Miles, the training, the transition of nursing training program, can you give any clarification to that? It's at Woodward High School?
Is that training for students in a program?
Yeah, for the students.
So I think my point is, we're pointing out that there are students at Woodward High School who are receiving some nursing training. That's correct. Oh, that sounds so exciting. Please tell me about it.
It's an amazing facility. If y'all have not been over to Woodward, I mean,
I want the public to hear this.
Yes.
We're talking about some sort of vocational type training and carrying on. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Mr. Miles, but I know that you are. It ain't you that I'm putting on the spot.
And I can talk a little more in details. I know Superintendent Mitchell has us talking about career tech later on.
Yes.
And we'll go into more detail, but this is something of the programs that we're looking at. It's very important because as you've looked at high school graduation, one of the pathways is through credentials. So we are putting those things into place so those students can get that credential and move forward.
Can we read this on the website someplace, or?
I think Lauren, that's another one of Lauren's jobs, to make sure that that's on the website. But yes,
so
we're revisiting all of those things with them. Matter of fact, Ms. Amat and I are meeting with all of the high school principals Friday, and we're gonna talk about those pathways, and we're gonna get more information for you. And then getting back to, I think we got something from Lauren today or yesterday regarding what the high school guide needs to look like in the future to better describe what is actually happening in our high schools and tell the stories, the great stories that are happening there.
Well, that sounds really great, and so I'm just whispering to my colleague here, because unfortunately I have to step out, but we're going to make an assignment a little bit later to talk to us and talk to the public about our career tech initiatives and programs and how we're graduating folks who are ready for college and career. Thank you very much. The only other thing I want to point out is also on page number 6, it's number 7, letter A, the Lighthouse Youth Services. That is indeed the charter school belonging to the district, is that correct? And it looks like we're supporting through the general fund some one-on-one individual aid services to the children in our charter school at the Lighthouse Youth Services. Okay, those are all my questions. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Can I comment on what you were saying? Because I think this is so critical. I know we keep bringing up this point of marketing and making sure we're telling our story, but I think it's more important than just, I think the reason, just to be clear about why I'm bringing it up, I assume why other folks are bringing it up, is because if we don't tell our story, someone else tells it for us, and it impacts our kids. And when I was at Woodward, in particular, I had a tour by 2 of the young men who were seniors there. They were so proud of their school. The tour took hours because they wanted to show me everything at their school. And this nursing program is one of the things we went to. But they also took me into one of their building rooms where there was a computer lab where all the students were learning 3D printing. So they were getting certified in 3D printing, and then it was an integrated program where they had to design a piece of a project that then they went and used later in the workshop to build with. They also talked about how the welding class welded the bike racks that the GE volunteers were coming in to build with other kids. They were building bikes with the GE volunteers. And I'm saying all this because when I asked the young men at the end of my tour, anything else you want to tell me? You know, anything else you want me to know? And one young man, what he said stuck with me because he was the second young man at one of our high schools who said something very similar. He said, I wish people out there knew we're not as bad as they all say we are.
Exactly.
So I had this combination of rage and sadness in me when he said that. And I said, well, what do you mean? And tell me more. And he said, you know, have you ever seen anything in the newspaper about Woodward other than, you know, some kids doing something wrong? And I couldn't argue with him. He said, have you ever seen anything on the news other than, all these kids at Woodward and what they do? He's like, they don't know that this is what we do, that we're designing on a 3D printer and that we're going to school, and that we have, he said, some of the kids are going to be nurses by the time they leave here. And that broke my heart because that is on us as the adults in this community that are telling a story about our kids that is not accurate. And so that is why I keep saying we have to get these stories out there, because it reflects on our kids and who they are and who we know they are versus how they're being portrayed.
That's right, and that is spot on. And you all might remember a couple meetings ago, I made an assignment to Lauren to draft a plan related to our social media and how we're telling our story better in that. And she and I are actually meeting in about 7 days, I promise, so that we can move that forward. But that's a continued full board conversation and discussion. And so thank you for that, Ms. Hoffman. And I think, my intent is to point out that wonderful and great things are happening in the district. We're just not telling our story. So we're not beating up on you all today at all, and I think the 3 presentations that you brought before us just really demonstrate the amazing work that's happening in the district. We collectively as a board and as an administration have to do much, much better about involving the community, being responsive to the community, and getting the word out. Okay? So, Ms. Wagner, call the roll. We lost track.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Ms. Bolton. Mrs. Hoffman. Ms. Jones. Aye. Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Timmons.
Aye.
President Copeland Dansby.
Aye. So there are several updates and inquiries, and we are going to start with Cincinnati Preschool Promise and move into Fall Board Retreat. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ms. Bates.
Thank you. Okay. Sure. So Preschool Promise. Was there a board member?
Yes.
Thank you. I had planned on just getting prepared for the meeting. I had prepared to talk a little bit about my thoughts about preschool promise, and it is kind of my perceptions and a little bit of reporting on the activity. And I'm going to ask Board Member Hoffman to join that since she and I are representative on the partnership team. And then, you know, after some of the discussion that we had earlier, it even kind of magnified my perceptions a little bit. So let me start by saying that the presentation that Mr. McDowell gave and talked about cultural transformation, I think we all agreed and we all know that when this partnership began around issue 44, that we recognized it as a shift in culture for the district, for the community. And we know that at some point in time, not if it succeeds, but when it succeeds, that this is going to be a model that people all over the country and perhaps beyond come to us and look. So we know that this is a good thing, you know. Now, as we begin to operationalize this and implement all the practices and the programs as part of it, we have to understand and be realistic that it has not been without challenges. And that there continues to be, and I have to be brutally honest, there continues to be problems with attitudes and behaviors around how this partnership gets implemented. So what we did in response to that was create ways that we thought were going to be, assumed were going to be really productive. And one of the things we did was pull together a partnership team that consisted of representatives from both the district and from Preschool Promise, and to do more of the strategic focusing and providing direction and guidance. And everybody who sits at that table, when we're in those meetings, we leave with a sense that we've accomplished something and that we're moving forward with something. Now, when we get outside the meeting, we all know, because it happens to all of us, people call us, the community talks to us, we start having these sidebar conversations about what's not working and what we can do, and all the attitudes come to surface and this and that. We don't like this person, that person. I'm here to say I'm committed to this, as I think all of us are. We have a shared vision that we need to move forward on. We have a philosophical foundation that we need to move forward on. And as a board, we all agreed that we would be unified in how we present to ourselves, to the district on behalf of the public. Transparency is very important to us. You know, so we have to, I think one of the things we wanted to do by putting this item on the agenda is really make an effort to be transparent and to provide clear communication to what was going on in the partnership. And so the last several meetings, we've had it on the agenda and we've not had an update. So an assignment is gonna be, we need to make sure we say something at every single meeting about what's going on. But my concerns are more around, and I didn't want to get into the content of what's happening. I think if people want to discuss particularly some of the activities that's going on, I think we can do that. But my concern is that we, number one, have to be clear about what our role is as a board and how we communicate within the board structure and within the district structure. I think what's happening is that people are being approached individually. There's individual conversations that happen, and whether we believe it or not, it feeds into some of the chaos that comes about when you're trying to implement. And one of the things I heard Superintendent Mitchell say when we had our internal meeting was, we're gonna maintain a high level status as a district about how we approach this. And I'm not, and I'm not trying to accuse anybody, this is not about blaming, but it is about us being solid and being firm and giving good direction to this expansion process and doing the best that we can do to implement and govern ourselves in terms of our fiduciary responsibility with the preschool promise. So having said all of that, there were a couple of things that I wanted to raise, and a good example of the lack of clarity around roles was in the action item that was identified in the Finance Committee, where there was some miscommunication, I guess, or misunderstanding about one of the assignments. And I think what really struck me is that I do recall having that discussion in Finance Committee, and I do recall us talking about helping Preschool Promise better align with policies within the board. And my comment and my suggestion was, maybe this is something Policy Committee could look at. And the feedback that I got was, in a public way, by the way, was that Finance Committee basically has a right to do the finance policies and all that, and I'm not disputing that. But every conversation about Preschool Promise cannot lie in one committee. So it is so very important for us to have these dialogues as a full board so that we can be clear what direction that we're going in. Because clearly something happened where it got kind of misdirected in that area. So I left the committee meeting thinking that it was an assignment to the Policy Committee and was prepared. I had it on the agenda and had just a brief conversation earlier with Cheryl Broadnax, who is our primary link to Preschool Promise, to basically get some feedback from her or some input into how we might approach this agenda item. So now I'm not quite sure if the board, and I look for board direction on that, as I'm not quite sure if this is even something we should even talk about at Monday's meeting. So there is, I think, a lack of clarity around roles, where responsibility lies as a group. Individually, I want to caution us not to have these splinter conversations. We have Superintendent Mitchell, who meets with leaders of the Preschool Promise on a regular basis. We have Cheryl Broadnax, who is our primary lead for the project. We have Ms. Hoffman and myself, who are the board's representative. So when I hear in the community that things are happening where other members of the board are getting involved, I'm asking that the least we do is when people approach you, at least give an opportunity and share that information with other people, and let's come to consensus about how we approach this. Because, like I said earlier, it does feed into the chaos that comes about when we're trying to implement. So the communication piece, I think, is very important. We send out the update, the weekly update, and as you can see, I mean, we can tell that that progress is being made and filling the seeds or whatever. But then the kinds of things that become challenging is when you look at, and I'm looking at the report from October 9th through 13th, that week, and on the back where it says the numbers. The first number is total students receiving tuition assistance. So in the district, it says there are 599 kids who are receiving tuition assistance. There are 358. One of the challenges has been that there's been disputes about how come the district's number is high and the community number is low. There's a process for us dealing with that. And so we have to be careful what we say to the community and to others about that particular challenge. And so hopefully we can agree to bring all of our issues to the full board or to the identified representatives so that we can be clear how we're approaching it. That's all I wanted to say. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit anxious about this. This is a great opportunity for our community, and we've done some good work. But this is a classic example of how I feel if we don't come together, it continues to get messy. And one of the things that I believe, I don't care what people say, I don't care what their attitudes is about this, we can't change their attitudes, but we can change our behavior, and we can model the behavior that we want to see, and that's it. And so I'm open to any ideas, questions, thoughts that people have around that. Ms. Bolton?
I have any number of questions about, comments, but my recollection of the finance discussion was that the Cincinnati Preschool Promise folks came in, and indeed, part of the issue was that we did insist and continue to insist, and it is part of the master agreement, that the policies followed by the Cincinnati Preschool Promise people are in keeping, particularly as it pertains to finance, minority hiring, enrollment, whatever, those listed policies. They were saying that they had a need to better understand all of the policies that they had to adhere to. That's what the conversation was. And I think the idea of the reference to the policy was that perhaps a list of relevant policies that pertain to them be drawn up so they're not, and I think I'm quoting myself from the meeting, so they're not required to go through our endless list of policies. And indeed, their starting point should be what was in the master agreement and in the board resolution that created it. That was my reference to policy. That's my recollection of the policy discussion. I don't have any interest in not having the financial aspects of Preschool Promise staying within finance. That's where it should be. That's where it needs to remain. But the policy, and I think finance, a review of finance policies traditionally, whether it's preschool or not, has traditionally been in finance. And I think it's the only committee that has it kind of worked out that way. Student achievement doesn't necessarily review student achievement policies or pertinent policies. And so that's where I am with that. I think it is useful for us to have more broad board discussions about preschool and about the preschool implementation. The last issues we talked about were making sure that 3-year-olds got subsidized. And we were 7-0 on that one. That was when Chris was still here. And we insisted that the 3-year-olds be there. That's the last full board discussion we had, and throughout those discussions, we remained, I think, very united. We also have people that we've appointed to represent us on that preschool board, Preschool Promise Board. And they've, I think, been doing a pretty good job representing the district. We do have our superintendent, we do have our treasurer, and we have folks that report to them being part of it. I do know that on some committees, our administrative folks and some of our representatives that are serving CPS, representing the CPS interest, feel outnumbered in the membership. And I also am going to say that it's my understanding, and again, this is second-handed, have been a number of times where incorrect and inappropriate and unprofessional dialogue has transpired in both a public and private way that is unacceptable. I'm also very concerned because 4 years ago now, when we went to Strive, when this first was being planned and talked about as an exciting thing, and we were the only ones willing to do it. The business community didn't want to do it. The city didn't want to do it. The county didn't want to do it. We did it, stepped to the plate, thankfully, because it answered something we'd been wanting for years, which was the expansion of preschool, both in our district and both private providers and our own. The very first thing I can remember, and from that meeting, when the Denver people came to talk, is that 75% of the kids in the Denver program go to Denver public schools. Now, that's a statistic that was told to us because everybody told us, don't worry, CPS, we won't be stealing your kids. Now, we get accused, since you want to make this public, we get accused of somehow we're taking kids away from the private sector. We may be. We all said 3 years ago in room 1A and also over in Mayerson when we had these wonderful men from Cincinnati convene the parties when it looked like this thing was going to fall apart. I specifically remember Eileen Cooper Reed. I specifically remember Melanie Bates saying, there's going to be unintended consequences if we are not careful. Because if we don't find a way to shore up the folks and help the folks that are in the private sector providing these opportunities for these little people, they won't be able to compete with an existing bureaucracy that's been doing this for 50 years. So my concern, and what I've been asking about throughout this, is first of all, that our fiduciary responsibility is prime. That is ORC. That is our responsibility. And this is money that we, through that wonderful partnership, won an election about. So it is our responsibility. That's not even a debatable point for me. The other piece that I'm interested in is making sure that these quality seats get developed in our own facilities as well as in the private facilities. I want that. I want this thing to succeed. I'm on the record for 9 years saying we should be expanding preschool, and we watch people take Head Start seats away from us because poverty moved beyond the city and into the county. We lost hundreds of seats. And through the leadership of Mrs. Ronan and this administration, we kept funding things we couldn't even afford to fund to have preschool and to have all-day kindergarten. So there's no body on earth more committed than this body to this thing succeeding. But it's going to have to succeed with, I think, to your point, better communication, more professional dialogue, and also us being very, very transparent. To me, everything, as we all know, I've said everything in public throughout this process. So I want to have that unity. I thought we were having more unity. I'm not clear as to where there might be a breakdown or somehow we've had a bad couple of weeks, because I think that it's been good, to my knowledge.
Ms. Jones?
At least better.
I think everything that Ms. Bolton says, I agree with in context. I think what I'm trying to say, in referencing the Finance Committee meeting dialogue, you are absolutely right in that the conversation was about identifying the relevant policies. So for me, the context is helping to provide a structural framework for how we identify which policies they align with. So that's what I understood. But the email today that I saw was more about, it had, and I can't quote it specifically, but it was clear that the communication was, well, assumed that there was some inaccuracy in what I was hearing at the committee, because it mentioned the finance committee, this is what happened, this was not the conversation. And so it left me pretty confused as to what we were hearing. And I'm okay. I mean, the conversation, I think, if we all can agree, was just to begin to have a dialogue in terms of how we partner with them in identifying a structure for aligning their policies, period. I don't have any desire to bring on any work in the policy committee that we don't need to have. So, and it was a way, and I think I said this in Finance Committee, it was a way to sort of share the responsibility as a board, because not every conversation in Finance Committee or any other committee has to take on every aspect of this implementation. And we as a group have to decide, where does that conversation lie? Is it full board? How do the committees? And we need to make assignments as a board. But what I find is, Finance Committee always has a robust agenda. It's always good stuff, good, very important agenda items. But I think sometimes we get so overly indulged in conversations so broadly, and so broad in context. And I'm just saying, use the committees, the other committees, to assist that. So that's it about that. And I think that prior to me taking a seat on this board, when I was talking with people in the community, I heard very different things about who wanted this project and that. And what I heard was the district didn't want to have any part to do with it. Now, I don't believe that, because when I came on board, I quickly saw and became part of that dialogue from the district about how this could work. So there's such a widespread and diversity of opinions and ideas and thoughts and all of that out there. My point in this whole conversation is that these kinds of conversations, and what people tend to do is they call a person here, or they see them out in the community and they ask them a question and all this. I can tell you what I do. I can't speak for everybody else. But when people approach me in the community, I do my best. I quickly think, what is my appropriate response? Because I'm a board member, I'm not going to just engage in a conversation that opens up questions and things. I want to be clear that I'm giving them the right information and pointing them to the right person who they can. So for the most part, I redirect them to Cheryl. I just say, you know, Cheryl Broadnax will be a good person for you to call. But, you know, recently, and I'm not going to cite examples, but recently I've heard that this person is talking to that person or this person or that person, and I'm like, that's interesting, because I haven't heard anything about that conversation. I'm sorry. So all I'm saying is that, again, modeling the behavior we want. We can't do anything about how CPP operates in terms of their own infrastructure. We can't change their attitudes. We can't really even change their behaviors, but we can change ours, and we can model that. And I do think that this board has a very good sense of what needs to happen. I'm just saying we all need to share that and operate as though, you know, we're all on the same page, and that's how we're communicating.
Ms. Hoffman.
I think this is a lot of good points being raised, but I think the fact that this CPS and CPP are building something brand new, and while building it, are implementing it, and while building it and implementing it, 1,000 kids are being served. That is incredible, right? And so I think, again, there are so many people working on on both teams, CPS team and CPP team, to make sure that this is going to be successful. But the last thing that the public heard was that one news story where I think like 30 kids or something were getting served, which was not accurate at the time because it was not accurately counting kids. But that, again, as we've been out on individual campaign trails or on issue 24 campaign trails, I've been saying, like, no, there's actually 1,000 kids now. And people are saying, wait, no, I read that story where there were 30-something. So I think some of this is just, what's the communication? How can we get it out there better to make sure that, like, yes, this is pretty incredible that in this first year, while it's still being built, we've been able to enroll this many children. And I think, too, we have had this placeholder, and I think we do need to decide, what do we want that time to be? We are getting these memos now that are really helpful to see week to week the growth in both the number of kids getting tuition assistance and the number of private providers that are getting grant assistance so that they can raise up to 3, 4, or 5 stars. And so I do think it could be valuable, since those memos are just going to us, to have, every time this is on here, if there's not a formal presentation, to just have a presentation by our superintendent, or probably Cheryl, to just say, here's where we are now with the number of kids enrolled and the number of private providers who are getting grants to increase. And I think always couching it in, again, I think to your point too, Ms. Jones, that from the beginning, we have said, CPS is going to be ready to serve more kids. So in the first few years, we know CPS is going to serve more kids, while the private providers are going to get built up so that we have more private providers at 3, 4, and 5 stars. So we know in the beginning, we'll have more kids than the private providers, but that we are going to run out of room. And the goal is, as we max out and we start to plateau, those private providers who are currently getting the grants in the next year or two will have many more private providers, so they'll be serving more kids. And that was the idea from the beginning around why we're not just doing tuition assistance, but we're also doing that piece where private providers are getting the grants in order to improve their number of stars. And so I think even if on every meeting, that is what was being updated. We have that reminder of what this build out is, and then a public notification of how many kids and how many providers are getting served through this program. that could be helpful. And then I think the other point is, in one of our conversations, we had said that Cheryl and Stephanie from CPP would come together with some dates that they'll do a deeper dive.
Yeah.
And that they'll get those to Phyllis. So potentially we should, we don't have that many more board members this board members, no, we got lots of board members now, board meetings this calendar year. So maybe pulling one of those that will definitely get a deeper dive update, and then figuring out for next calendar year, which ones will have a deeper dive update, which one will have this. But I think, to your broader point too, one of the things that I think is going to be important is that we are monitoring ourselves in our conversations, whether they're happening full board or in committee, that these conversations can go all over the place and they can grow and expand. And they're all good conversations and interesting conversations, but they're not all necessarily conversations the board needs to be having, right? Some of them start to get into the weeds of this work. And so I think that's going to take some work on our part, especially for our committee chairs, when we start hearing, wait a minute, this might be more the weeds, this might be more administrative work, this isn't the high level. Our job is to be talking about the stuff in the master agreement and high level finance stuff. If it's moving away from that our board chairs are refocusing us and saying, that's a good conversation, but that sounds like something our legal team needs to handle, or Cheryl's teams needs to handle, and that we are monitoring ourselves so that we don't end up having the conversations in the weeds. Because I think that's where some of the frustration comes into play too, where CPP is now their own entity. And I think there's some feeling like we keep meddling in some places where they can be making their own decisions. And I think we try to do that as a board, that we don't get into our own administration's work. And I think we just need to have that same mindset when we're thinking about the CPP work too. And it's hard because it's all new and there is not a framework for it. But I do think that's going to fall on us as board members, and especially our committee chairs, that if they do hear us going into the weeds and away from the bigger picture work of the board, that they're refocusing the conversations.
Yes. I just one comment, and I always want to recognize the positive things. I think since Cheryl Broadnax took the lead, she's done a wonderful job in representing, being the face of the district, including addressing and dealing with some of the confrontative kinds of situations. And she's done an excellent job. Likewise with our treasurer, who often attend these meetings by themselves. And that's a hard position to be in, especially if you're asked on the spot to address something and get a lot of not so favorable feedback. That's very hard. But I think if they begin to bring that to us as a board, because it is full board conversations, they can't make decisions for the district. So when they bring that back to the board, and saying again, that's why it's so important for us to have this full discussion, we can help them with that, and we can be supportive to them around that. And finally, and then I'll be quiet, board member Bates talked about some of the rumors around, the assumptions or perceptions that we're taking away the kids from the private sector. Expansion, this expansion is about all of us sharing the vision for what kids need. And it's not about, and so that's the message that we've continued to share in the partnership. This is not a us against you, this is we. This is all of our kids. So if that 50-year history helps us get to the goal, which is getting these kids in the seats, then that's the attitude and the practices that we should respect and be about. It's not about, we're not in competition. That's all I need to say. Thank you all, because I know I ran it a little bit, but just needed to say that. So. And I am going to be, I know we have to move on, but I am going to be asking for a change on the agenda relative to that in the assignment section.
Okay, and quickly, Ms. Bolton, because we're way over time right now.
Now, quickly, what I would suggest is that the representatives of the board speak with the board as to how to best represent us, which is what you've done a good job doing. But again, this goes to the heart of the matter. We've not had full board discussion
You're right.
about this.
You're right.
This is a systemic problem, and, you know, ad hoc's pointed to it. So I think that's the first problem. The other problem, I think, is that we don't want to keep sending our administrators and our folks in to be outnumbered and outgunned and accused of things that are unfair.
Right.
And that's unacceptable. This district's not laying down, playing dead anymore. We have a story to tell, we've work to do, and whatever. The other piece I would say is that there is nobody on the board that is not committed to the little people getting the good seats.
Absolutely.
And the other reality is, in full transparency, we really need to know the list of the quality providers. We'd like to know that as we look at the desert piece. We'd also like to know more about who's getting the grants and how we can help and facilitate that. And even if there are grants yet, because it's still early in the program to be doing the grants. So there's things that we need to know with fuller information. And I think both sides, frankly, hedge the information and try to time it for both a public relations piece, which is reasonable, because that one article was just a kiss of...
Terrible, yeah.
It was bad. So I think it's been a healthy discussion, but I maintain that there are things that have been done. We passed a resolution, we entered into the partnership, it's pretty direct, and also there is a master agreement that is supposed to be guiding the activities, as well as our ORC responsibilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is full board retreat location. Ms. Hoffman has that information.
Yes, so our board president had offered her place of employment, the Wesley Services, as off-site location, if we wanted to use that for our board retreat coming up in November. So that's an option. We can always, of course, stay here if somebody else has another option. But I think the idea was maybe we could do it somewhere not in our little board conference room. So just wanted to open that up to where we want to have that retreat.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I understand, I think that makes sense. It'd be good to go to that side of town occasionally, for sure. As a West Sider, I'll say that. But it's my understanding that at least one board member will not be able to attend the retreat, and that's Mr. Manera, but the retreat will continue anyway.
Yeah, I've spoken with him to make sure that this was okay to move forward. He and I are going to meet before the retreat, and once we have the plan from our facilitator, so I can get his input, and then we'll meet after the retreat, so I can also bring him up to see there.
Okay, thank you. Assignments. Ms. Jones?
Yes, okay. In follow-up to the presentation that Mr. Miles did, if we could ask the administration perhaps to put something on as a presentation around those career tech programs so that we can inform our public of what the impact of those are. That's one. Secondly, regarding the preschool promise, I would like to request that that update item be changed instead of, because we're not really talking about Cincinnati Preschool Promise, we're talking about the partnership. Maybe we can change the names to reflect more of a collective process, an inclusive process. Preschool expansion, maybe, a broader context, because we talk about lots of things. And then what was the other one? I think that's it. I know there was one more, but I lost it. That's what I get for not writing it down.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes, I think we had a number of assignments, and I think the administrators were writing them down during their presentations, but I know to Ms. Trimble Oliver, we had talked about the kind of the mapping out of what are our high schools going to need in terms of space, and there was also the question of our preschools going to our kindergartens, making sure there's enough seats there, so I think there was 2 mapping assignments there. For Lauren, got potentially 1 million assignments. Okay, 8. Okay, that's a much more, maybe more reasonable than 1 million, but still a lot. So just, I mean, I think those were all just in general. How are we communicating kind of all of the great stuff that you all were showing here? There were some specific ones with the magnet enrollment. I know our board president was asking how are we going to the people, not always having them come to us. And then with Spencer, a purposeful recruitment plan again to make sure that we're reaching a diverse audience of families there. I think those were all the assignments I had written down from that conversation.
I did think of, I remembered the one. This was in reference to the agenda item on the policy committee regarding the alignment structure for preschool promise. The question is, does the full board want us to continue to initiate that conversation? And if you do, then I would like to ask board members to please submit to me any of your concerns, questions, comments, desires around, or recommendations for that, just to help us initiate, to get the conversation started.
I think we have to, right? Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, and I think the administration is probably better able to figure out which of the policies that probably pertain to the whole preschool implementation. If they send that, to get them to do that, send it to you all on policy, I think that would expedite things, because they're better aware of it, I think, than I would be. But on that preschool, to add to Ms. Hoffman's list there, I asked also to see how this pertains to the preschool deserts.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking, because I'm seeing this conversation is really even broader than that, I think the suggestion that you're making, Ms. Bates, is...
Bolton.
It's a
Sorry.
Bolton.
Yeah, Ms. Bolton, is that one of the recommendations would be to have administration do more of a deep dive in the policies. And we can include that. I'm not necessarily asking administration to have that ready by Monday. I'm not asking that.
Right.
So just so that we can talk about it a little bit.
And the starting point for that is our resolution and
The master agreement,
master
yes,
agreement.
I got that,
I think we spent some time in discussion, full board, in figuring out which ones we were most interested in including. So I think that's at least a good starting point for all of you.
Can I have one
Okay.
more?
Go ahead.
Okay, so one more, coming out of Student Achievement Committee, we were talking with the superintendent about her evaluation for this year. So we know the superintendent is coming up with a timeline and with kind of a condensed evaluation for this year, given that it's a shorter year, et cetera. Student Achievement will come back to you all with a much broader plan here, but what the superintendent did ask was that if we could get her some quick, immediate, high-level feedback of her first couple of months. And so we need to make an assignment to ourselves to get together as a board in executive session. I believe this, Dan can tell us if it's not, but I believe since we usually do anything about somebody's evaluation can be in an executive session, that we have some conversation and come up with any high-level bullets that we would like to get to the superintendent. And we do not have many meetings left. And so I think we just need to make sure we're signing that for potentially the next meeting. And then I think the second thing that so if we can make that an assignment, so that we're all thinking about that and coming into that meeting with some thoughts gathered, so we're being efficient. And I think the second piece being, we talked about we talked with the superintendent about revising the rubric to make it more innovative and more, and kind of just reflective of what we want our district leader to be aspiring for. And to revise that rubric is going to take more people power than a board member could do, or even a board committee and expertise. And so our HR team, being already really stretched, probably also does not have the time or capacity for that. So we wanted to have some sort of board conversation about whether or not this is something we want to try to find a budget for, to hire someone like a consultant to work on with our superintendent and our board to get that piece done. And again, there's timing, right? If somebody's going to do this, it has to start rather soon. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up today under assignments, whether or not this is, I don't know, maybe this was an inquiry, not an assignment, but this is just so critical that our superintendent has a really valuable evaluation, that it's transparent, that it's reflective of what we want our superintendent working on. And so we have to have it done soon enough that she knows what she's going to be evaluated for. And so we just need to get rolling on this if it's something that we want to do as a board, is do this kind of revamp.
That revamp would occur full board and also in student achievement. But I think we did meet with the superintendent, both as a committee and also as an assignment, Ms. Hoffman and I did, and she did revise in part what we have as an evaluation, and also offered some, I think, more demanding kinds of things that she'd like to test against her performance, which would be great. I think we should have a full board discussion, and I hate to do it with a few of us as to whether or not we need a consultant to help us design the new evaluation. This is a compressed evaluation for just
There are
this
two
period of
pieces here.
time.
Yep.
And during this transition, we don't need a consultant to help us with that. We need that in a longer frame. It might even, you know, it's more of the beginning of the year, but we need to make a decision as to whether or not we want to go in that direction. But I think you're right, the executive session prior to the next board meeting would be an opportunity for the full board to meet with the superintendent and have that opportunity to go over kind of where the committee was and where the superintendent is, and we're together as to how the full board would like to improve, expand, or make more relevant to this superintendent, the evaluation. So if we can make sure that's scheduled as the executive session for the next board meeting, if we can have the president do that, and if that fits the superintendent's calendar, which you say is on speed dial at this, I mean, on speed right now, I'll tell you. So that would be good to do that. So the assignment is the executive session, and the next executive session, the next board meeting would be that dialogue with the superintendent.
And the next board meeting is our retreat.
Oh.
So we would have to do it then, because the next board meeting after that is not until December the 4th. And that's more than a month away. So we would have to have that discussion. Okay?
That's fine.
So we'll
That's good.
just do
I
that,
think we-
okay?
That makes sense, and actually it might kind of clear the decks a bit to go into the other discussions that we have.
Okay.
And also, and this may come into play as to where we may have our retreat on November the 16th, is now that our policies are on board docs, all of the board members must either be retrained, or in the case of Mr. Timmons, be trained on board docs. We are paying for that service. Everyone is getting technology from the district. We are now, in what century are we? The 21st century? We've talked about modeling. In some situations, we need to model at the board level. So I am going to strongly suggest that part of the agenda during the retreat be dedicated to an orientation of board docs and ensuring that the board members have adequate technology and internet access, whether or not we have it, you know, with the gracious invitation of our board president or elsewhere. I believe that that's a necessity that we begin using that technology.
Yes. I know that feels like an urgent, I think it's important. We can't squeeze everything into this agenda. To my knowledge, that agenda is pretty full already.
I had nothing to say about it, so I have no
Well, I
idea.
mean,
This
Well,
is
no,
my
it was-
input.
It was in the ad hoc notes
Yes.
that we approved last meeting, what the agenda was going to be. I think my concern is just when we tried to do this board goal setting this past year, as we all know, other things kept creeping into the agenda, and our facilitator, who had, each time he came, thought he had 3 hours, suddenly literally had an hour and a half, and we never got to the place where we actually set, we had our goals, but we never had measures because we never had time because we let other things come. So I think I think we can do take a half hour and talk about superintendent's evaluation, but we're gonna need the other 2.5 hours to talk about board goals, or else I think we're gonna be in the same position as last year. So I think this is an important thing for us to be doing, and as the board docs training, but potentially we do it in December, maybe we take a half hour of one of our first December meetings and get it on the agenda. Because I don't think we can add everything to our.
Okay, let's
retreat.
do this. Training is one of the meetings that we are able to be paid for.
There you go.
So we can have a training. I think it's going to take a little bit more than a half an hour to train this board on board docs, because we've been working on this for, about 6 years now? So I would suggest that, agreed, we don't have that time on the 16th, but we do schedule a paid training for our board members on board docs and begin using it as of the first meeting in January.
We should invite newly elected board members as well.
That's assumed that will happen.
Yep.
So that,
Give me a printer.
Okay.
that can be arranged. And if there is nothing further to come before the board, I call this meeting adjourned.
That's what Chris and I were united about too. Give us the hard copy.
The only problem with hard copies is that the paper you
Oh, I
collect.
know.
My office at home is just full of paper, and I keep saying, I need to go through and shred, get rid of this stuff.
This is terrible.